are live. And so I'm going to give us a chance to do that thing that we do best here. Welcome everybody into the throne room, the place that we have created for us to be able to purge from our issues, heal from our wounds, and find rest so that we might be able to transform into that which we have been called and created to become, and that is royalty. My name is Monica Jackson. I am your host for this afternoon. And on the side of me, I believe on that side of me, is our guest, our special guest. She is here as a candidate running for city council in Fort Myers, Florida, in Ward 3. Her name is Miss Chantel Rhodes, and we are so excited and so glad and eager to have her here with us this morning. So let's give it up, everybody, for Miss Chantel Rhodes as we welcome everyone into the room. So, Chantel, you have not been here before, so we would just like to give everybody an opportunity to like and share, give them a chance to connect with people on the various social media platforms. So let's just take an opportunity to do that now.
All right, and thank you so much, Monica, for this opportunity. Thank you for the work that you
Absolutely.
have been doing to even have this sort of a platform so that our issues can be uplifted. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, for everyone who is just joining us today, so that you know, we are having this show as a remembrance in recognition of the last holiday that just passed, which was Martin Luther King's holiday, also known, AKA, as Civil Rights, our International Civil Rights Day. We want to be able to uplift some conversations. And for those of you who know me, I don't always like to do things according to textbooks. Normally, we take this time to remember MLK and say all the things that, people lie about and say that they've done and they didn't do, and all the extra stuff, and really just ride a wave. Today, we are going to take the cover off on what I believe is a much needed conversation as we do some reflection on what this really means for us. What does civil rights? Do I really need to be civil with my rights in today's society? And where do we want to go with this? And so, as you guys are liking and sharing, we're going to share a video with you, and then we're going to get back to Miss Rose, who's going to kind of introduce and tell us a little bit about herself and the work that she's done. She's done some tremendous things out here in the community here in Southwest Florida. She's been traveled, very well traveled. And so we want to hear a little bit about her story. And then we're going to get right into the nitty gritty. So let's take a chance to sit back and just, hear from what our forefather had to say about this civil rights movement.
I make my decisions on the basis of my moral commitment, and I take my ministry very seriously. I would not say that the civil rights movement is dead. It's simply that we are moving to a new phase of the movement. For now 12 years, we struggle to end legal segregation and all of the humiliation surrounding legal segregation. So it was a struggle for decency. It was a struggle to get rid of extremist behavior toward Negroes. Now we are in a new phase, and that is a phase where we are seeking genuine equality, where we are dealing with hard economic and social issues. And it means that the job is much more difficult. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to get a program that will force the government to put billions of dollars into ending slums. It's a wonderful thing to work and be concerned about integrating public accommodations, or integrating the public schools, which I will continue to work for with vigor and with zeal. But I've also got to be concerned about the survival of a world in which to be integrated. And these issues to me are tied together in that sense.
How did you arrive at this decision, and who influenced your thinking?
I thought about it for several months, and finally I went away to write a book in Jamaica where I had a chance to reflect and meditate and do a great deal of thinking about the war in Vietnam. And I came to the conclusion then that I had no alternative but to take a vigorous stand against the war.
Dr. King, when you speak out against this war, do you speak as a Negro opponent of the war? Is there something especially anti-Negro or racist about the war that impels you to speak out?
I cannot overlook the fact that I am a Negro and that this war is doing a great deal to destroy the lives of thousands and thousands of my brothers and sisters. We are dying physically in disproportionate numbers in Vietnam, some 22 and 4/10% of the deaths, even though we are only about 11% of the population. The other thing is that we are dying spiritually and psychologically in disproportionate numbers at home, in the ghettos. And I think the war itself accounts for our constant spiritual and psychological death here at home.
I weighed the criticisms that I would get. I thought about even the fact that some Negroes wouldn't understand, and some respectable Negro leaders who are more concerned about being invited to the White House than invited to the cause of justice would be against me. I weighed all of this. And as I weighed in it, as I prayed over it, something said to me that you got to speak on this issue. If you don't speak on it and others don't speak, I'm not going to give up. I'll have even the rocks to cry out against this war. It's an evil war. And no matter where it leads, no matter what abuses it may bring, I'm going to tell the truth.
Well, we are most grateful for the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who took the stand and the courage to be able to speak truth and to allow truth to permeate from his bones. And what I do want to acknowledge is the fact that he was not liked by many during his day. That he was not loved by many during his day, but that he was willing to go against the grain to see our liberation happen. And so, as we continue this work, as I continue the work in truth telling and truth seeking, today I have with us again a very special guest to this platform, to the throne room, to the network, a candidate in the running, future councilwoman of Ward 3 of Fort Myers, Florida. I am excited to have you here with us, Ms. Rhodes, and just give the people a little bit of awareness. Let them know who you are and how you're coming.
Future councilwoman, I like that. You better speak that into existence. So candidate Chantel Rhodes is something that is a title that I've just adopted when I made my decision to get involved in the way that I felt God was truly leading me to get involved. So I am Chantel Rhodes. I was born and raised right here in Fort Myers, Florida. Grew up in the church, grew up under the umbrella of a family who emphasized service and who emphasized getting out there, getting among the people and fellowshipping with the people and tying that directly to my spiritual sense. And I've done some work. You mentioned I traveled. I've been to 34 countries. I lived in China for 2 years as an English teacher. But prior to that, I attended the University of South Florida where I studied criminology. And then I went on to pursue my graduate degree in social work at Georgia State University. So I was in Atlanta at the time that George Zimmerman, we experienced that acquittal of him, of his murder, of Trayvon Martin. So that is what launched the Black Lives Matter movement, yet another movement. So I participated in protests in Atlanta and the whole 9 yards, and I learned how to use my voice and to be an activist amongst such a large and such a dynamic group of young people at Georgia State University. But fast forward to now, or to 2019, when I moved back to the United States, back to my hometown of Fort Myers, Florida, from China. In 2020, we experienced the brutal slaying of Mr. George Floyd. So the entire world turned out for that. And so I made sure that here in Southwest Florida, that we were not left out. I think sometimes people feel as though they have to go to a city like Atlanta or DC, or, they have to go to a larger city to be a part of a larger demonstration. But this was our opportunity to show our elected officials here locally, to show our government, and to show one another that we actually care. We actually give a F. So yeah, that's exactly what we did. We showed up, we had marches, we had protests, and that led to conversations with law enforcement. All of these things that never would have happened had Southwest Florida not said, you know what, we want to join in this march, in this cry for justice. So here I am today, fast forward a couple more years, and there is an opportunity for me to lead in the area that I spent a large part of my childhood, which is Ward 3 of the city of Fort Myers, the city of palms, a city that I have grown to really love and appreciate. So thank you so much for having me, Monica.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, on the show, we like to give shout outs to those who are wanting to participate. We ask that if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the comment section on your particular platform. I am able to see them. We are able to see them. And we like to actually respond and engage our guests. And so we thank you for the shout outs that we received from Michelle and Melinda right now. And so, as you guys continue to like and share, we're asking for your participation this evening. I'm going to just start us right off and jump right in, if that's okay with you, Chantal.
Absolutely. Let's do
All
this.
right.
Let's have this
Let's do it.
conversation.
Yes. So one of the things that you just spoke about was the Black Lives Matter movement. You talked
Mm.
about being the facilitator and a key promoter of this movement. What is it that you believe is the core benefit of those types of movements for communities of color?
One of the main benefits that I see is that it keeps us connected to the fight of our
Hmm.
ancestors, to the struggles and the plights and predicament of those who have come before us. So we've seen this demonstrated as we celebrate Dr. King. We have to acknowledge the civil rights movement, and then going on to the Black Power movement. You and I earlier talked about the Poor People's Campaign and the Chicago Freedom Movement, all of and just a host of other marches and rallies and boycotts that basically pointed to the injustices that Black people in particular are experiencing. So many other marginalized groups, but Black people in particular are experiencing to this day. So I believe that it keeps us connected to our cause, to our purpose, and it helps us to not, you know, lose sight of the fact that these issues aren't you know they haven't disappeared. They are still very much present. They manifest themselves in different ways. We may not see public lynchings, but those private lynchings definitely do take place, and that systematic oppression is very real. So it doesn't matter who the characters are. The characters will change throughout time, but to continue this movement, and I believe what the Black Lives Matter movement does is it keeps us in line with that vision and with all of the work that Dr. King highlighted during his day.
Hmm. So I like to play devil's advocate,
Mm,
and if I may, I'm gonna ask a question, and sometimes, and please, for our audience, know that I do have a strong political background, and I do and have spoken on several platforms myself, and so the
mhm,
questions that I ask are really supposed to be able to really get us to think about where we are and why we do what we do. And so, my
Mhm.
question to you is, with regards to these movements, do you believe that any of these movements can stifle a community of people or can cause the stakeholders themselves to kind of lose sight of what the real mission is? And have you seen that across time?
I think there's always the possibility that we can lose sight of what is important, but I don't think the movement itself causes that problem. We will see other
Mm,
problems emerge. We every movement, there's a movement within a movement. I remember watching a documentary with the Black Panther Party, and the women of that movement talked about the sexism that was taking place as they were fighting for Black liberation within the party, within the Black Panther Party. They had to deal with such sexism. So I do think that there are some consequences to everything, pros and cons, but losing sight of the real mission, I think that is one of the things that I can appreciate about movements like this, is because it helps us to stay focused on what it
mhm.
is we joined the fight for.
Yeah, so it was good that you brought up the movements inside of movements. So with
Mm,
the Black Lives Matter movement, we got to see a lot of things happen at that moment in time where it shifted from Black Lives Matter to Blue Lives Matter to
absolutely.
All Lives Matter. And so do you believe that a lot of oftentimes a lot of people misunderstood and misrepresent what these types of movements are about?
Hmm. Absolutely. There's always going to be that factor of ignorance, and ignorance is not to be used in a way to demean or diminish anyone. There is simply what we don't know. So we always have people who their mouths run a lot faster than their brain does, or they will speak out against something before even taking the opportunity to fully understand it. And we saw that happening. So people were hearing Black Lives Matter, and the first thing that they were to think is that we were saying only Black Lives Matter, or that the lives of the blue, which represents law enforcement, that blue lives did not matter. So the thing I can appreciate about All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter is that it still points to Black Lives Matter. There would be no All Lives Matter saying, or a Blue Lives Matter saying, had it not been for that Black Lives Matter, the power of that Black Lives Matter movement. So I can appreciate the spinoffs, because you know what, those people have something to say too. Because
Mhm.
we know, in fact, that all lives do matter. But when we say Black Lives Matter and someone chooses to undermine that with Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, I think we can just chalk it up to the ignorance of those people, and not always just the ignorance, because I try to be a very fair person even in my representation. And I know that there are some people who just don't want to be left out of the story, but this movement was started because of the Black lives that were being affected. Not to take away anything from, I've heard people say, well, more white people are killed by the police than Black people. Well, you know what? There's also a lot more white people that exist here in the United States of America. So when we look at things globally, from a global perspective, I am so proud of the Black Lives Matter movement, as misunderstood as it continues to be, and rightfully so. There was some language, I believe, in the web page of the original Black
Yes.
Lives Matter movement that has now been adjusted and taken down, because there were some concerns about the Black Lives Matter movement being anti-Semitic or
Mm,
anti-Jewish, and that they were against the nuclear family. But I believe they went and corrected that to say that they believe family extends beyond the nuclear mom, dad, children, mom, dad,
mm.
baby, that we are taught to see this world as. So I can appreciate how this movement has blown up. And I mean, you had people all in the UK, and I'm a world traveler, so I pay attention. Black Lives Matter, not just in countries within Africa. We had countries in Asia, in Europe, saying Black Lives Matter. They understood the importance of what we had started here, right here in the United States.
Yeah, that's good. So I must say that I was probably one of those people who were like, I don't know so much about this Black Lives Matter movement
Mm-hmm.
stuff. The verbiage is not one that I would like to ride the wave of. But what I do know is that Black lives absolutely do matter, and that
Absolutely.
Black lives are marginalized group of people, whether they are white, brown, blue, orange, yellow. They are marginalized and oppressed people. And what I believe is that the fight that Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, although we want to always gear it towards a certain particular group of community of people, their fights were about those who've been marginalized and oppressed, because there were even those who were white. I mean, if we look at different community of people can all say we've been marginalized, we've been oppressed
Absolutely.
by the people, right? By the
Absolutely.
enemy, by the evil. So we have a question. How do we maintain the momentum of the movement locally and nationally after tragic events have passed? That's a great
Oh,
question,
Lord have
Michelle.
mercy. That's a great question. Because it is discouraging. I remember there were times when we got some bad news. It's like we sit on edge. We get the news from when a killing takes place, and then are they gonna go to trial? Are they going? And then we have to wait for that verdict. And every single time I have news reporters calling me, oh, do you have anything to say? Are you guys going to do a counter
Mm-hmm.
protest or a rally? And it is exhausting. And I think one of the things that we have to do is make sure that, we hear this term self care. I think we have to
Mm,
take care of ourselves as individuals, and we also have to take care of our families and our people collectively, because we run the risk of compassion fatigue. And not only
mm,
compassion fatigue, we do all this marching, this yelling, we find all these facts about these cases, and then there's still a not guilty verdict. That is very discouraging in and of itself. So I think one of the ways we can address that fatigue is to take care of our hearts and minds in so many different ways. Our mental health, staying connected to like-minded people. You don't know
mm-hmm.
how important that is to stay connected to people who believe what you believe, because you will
Yes.
fuel each other. You'll be the fire for one another. So I think, yeah, stay involved too. Stay involved, and guess what? Take breaks when you need to. I did a 4-month break right in the middle of all that. I disappeared from social media because I had to take care of myself. So when we don't put the burden on just one or two people to carry it out for our communities, you'll see that fire is able to continue to burn, but people have to show up first. There's it shouldn't be, oh, Chantel, are we going to have another protest, or are we going to protest this? There should be people who are armed and ready to take the streets, if not take the streets, to be able to speak on an issue, to be able to look at their brothers and sisters and be able to offer that encouragement and that uplifting. And we have to look at history, right?
Right.
When you look at Dr. King, like you said, he wasn't liked when he was living. Puff Daddy and Biggie Smalls, they have a song that says, "You're nobody until somebody
To
kills
somebody.
you." Until
Mm-hmm.
somebody kills you. Even look at Christ. Look at Christ and how his message blew up after his crucifixion, after his death. So remember throughout history that we
Mm,
cannot just lay down and fall victim to the
mm.
current circumstance. There is always a future. There is always a, if we keep going, this will happen. And we have to tap into that knowledge and that power as well.
Yeah, that's good. And I always one of my classes I do a training on justice with the youth, and
Okay.
in one of those classes we talk about self care. But we always think about self care from a perspective of I have to go back and it's all that mushy stuff and let me get my mind right. But self
Mm-hmm.
care is also getting my mind right by stretching myself. So what does it mean to take myself from a place of ignorance to a place of enlightenment? What does it mean for me to go out and to do the work that most people don't want to do so that I can take myself from one place to the next? That's self care.
Right.
That's loving myself. And oftentimes that conversation is really left out of what it looks like to care for
Absolutely.
me,
To care
right?
for self, because when we hear self care, we think of going to get a nice meal and a massage and turning on TV and getting some ice cream. But self care is also breaking. breaking that
Yes.
ignorance down. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
you got to pick up a book, join a movement, join a coalition, join a cause, and get well armed with knowledge, well armed with the truth of the situation. If you have a cause in particular, and there's so many different things you can participate in: prison reform, the elimination of poverty, helping Black and brown students achieve on an academic level. There are so many ways to get involved.
That's good. So, what should some of these community leaders and the communities be focused on as it pertains to the liberation of those who are marginalized and oppressed? Oftentimes, we have these conversations and we look at these types of documentaries and we think about, oh,
Mhm.
our liberation. We have all of these conversations, but they're surface conversations. What is it
Mhm.
that we really should be focused on? So, as you run,
Yeah.
as you do the work, what is it that you should be focused on as far as what it means for the liberation of a community of people, specifically here in Lee County?
Specifically here in Lee County, what my run is about, running my mouth. That's one thing that I can do, and I can do it quite well. And I want to do it in a way that allows others to benefit from it, and that shines kind of a flashlight on some of those dark areas where people are not paying attention to. Because, why would people do right if they didn't have that accountability, right? So
Mm,
um the original question was what we should be focused on, right? What should we be focused on? And that is such a tricky one, because focus, when you hear the word focus, you want to zoom in, you want to hone in on something, and that can cause a lot of people to say, well, I'm not good at that, or I don't really care about stuff like that. That focus has to be extended and expanded to each individual. That person, like Michael Jackson says, I need to start with the man in the mirror. I need to start with the woman in the
mm,
mirror. Who am I? What do I want my city to be, my town, my community to be? What do I care about? What interests me? And start there, and then start digging right
that's good.
there.
That's good. So at the network, we have our slogan is aspire to hire. It's helping
Mhm.
to inspire individuals to aspire to whatever it is that their hire is. And that means we're doing the self-identity work. We're looking at ourselves from where we are in our respective places and what is it that we need to do intrinsically so that it manifests itself externally, so that it
Mhm.
makes global change, right? So change within our
Absolutely.
families, within our communities, and globally. So when I think about this word liberation and you talk about this inward work and looking in at self and shining the light
Yeah.
dimly on some spaces, when we think about liberation being the thing that takes a person from imprisonment,
Mm.
bondage, and being held captive to something or to a place whereby they are feeling free or release from that
Mm.
thing, how do you see yourself fitting into that liberator category? Do you see
Listen,
yourself
the
in there?
liberation started with me, and I've actually been going in on the topic of freedom and liberation with a very
Mm,
close friend of mine. But again, looking at myself, looking at my own journey, knowing what it feels like to be bound in certain ways, and we can take it there. If you like
mhm,
to, what it feels like to be bound and having to sit in the discomfort of being bound, and then saying, all right, Chantel, you're going to be uncomfortable either way. Are you
mm,
going to be uncomfortable because you sat bound to what someone else believed about you? Or are you going to suffer the discomfort of what it takes to maneuver out of that mindset? And it takes
mm,
time. But I had to choose which discomfort I wanted. And I over the years, and it is a process, over the years I've liberated myself from that nasty beast, called the ego. And of course, I still have to work at it. I still have to train
mm,
myself at it. But I think once we start there and we take a look at what's worth fighting for, is it
mm.
easier to get rid of myself, or is it easier to get rid of a doctrine that teaches me to hate myself? or a
Mm,
belief that teaches me that I am not good enough? Which one is easier to cope with over time? So for me, that liberation started with, like you said, it started with my own mindset, me examining myself closely. See, that
let
self-awareness
a
is a
man
critical.
examine himself.
Listen,
Yes.
listen, that self-awareness is a critical piece. Let a man examine himself. Let every man examine himself. See where you stand. See what it is that you believe in, what you care about. And like I said, start there and start digging. And that liberation is not going to just pop up like, oh, like, you see the lights and stuff shining like, oh, we're free. Oh, no. Oh no, this freedom is something that we'll work at until the day we die. Our children and grandchildren
Mm,
will work at it in various ways, and we'll find new things that we need to be liberated from,
that's
as
good.
time goes on. So this concept of freedom and liberty being just this single thing that we strive for instead of a daily practice and a daily work, we have to start to dismantle that.
Yeah, die to self daily. So while you're speaking, I'm thinking about, and for those of you new to the platform, we are not a religious platform. We are a platform that stands on faith. But I have to be true to myself, and what is true to me is that I'm a lover of Jesus,
Mhm.
and I believe in God for wholeheartedly. And what God reveals to me in my own time, I reveal it to the people as it comes. And
Right.
so one of the things that came to mind was Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane right before
Mhm.
he was going on his crucifixion journey, right? Where he was getting ready to go on the cross to
Right.
die for us. And he had to go back and he had to pray and say, Lord, take this cup from me.
Take it from me.
Take it from me.
Mhm.
That was a request of liberation. He was
Mhm.
requesting to be set free from what was about to and had been bounding him to a people and to a community and to an unjust system, and to ways of thinking by others that
Right.
had him left condemned. But the response was, but let thy will be done.
Yeah.
And so I think that as we continue on the journey of trying to find our liberation, Lord, let thy will be done is important in that aspect. So I'm going to continue on the part of the journey that we are on today to ask you about. M- I'm going to shift this a little bit about.
Okay. I was about to. I was looking forward to you preaching some more. I like that.
Oh no, I ain't gonna preach today, but I really wanted us to think about healing in this journey,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
do you believe that healing is an important part of this process? And
Mm.
if it's something that is important, how can we begin the process of healing? What does that all look like for us as a community of people as you run for council? Because I can only think, and this is for me, right? That there's a part of me that when I decided and said, hey, I might run for some type of office, that a part of me was really looking to heal a community of people.
Mm.
That I was
Yeah.
looking for my own internal healing. And so I asked that question to you about healing, um, and what it might look like in your endeavors,
Right.
so that we can kind of see the broader scope of what do the people actually mean in this process? What do they
Mm.
mean to you in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to healing, I think that that internal healing can sometimes be initiated by the external work that needs to be done. There's a quote that says, our internal reality, our external reality is an opportunity to heal our internal upset. And forgive me. Okay,
Mm,
see, I knew the lights was gonna go off in here. I'm all
it's all right.
work late, working late, but y'all can still see me.
We can still
But
see
as
you.
far as that healing that takes place, like one will trigger the other, but that healing does start with, again, examining our mental wellness, because we don't want to continue to see the world through the lenses of our pain,
Right.
because then we can make some mistakes and we can misjudge some circumstances because we
Mm,
are so bound to our own trauma and to our own experiences. So I always say what I do, that as my primary job here at Golisano Children's Hospital, I work with Kids Minds Matter, and that is basically addressing the the ignorance, that we hold. Again, ignorance is not necessarily a bad thing because we're all ignorant to something. But when it comes to mental illness and how it affects us to this day, and when you look at Black and brown communities, when you look at Black folks, and you trace that all the way back, through the transatlantic slave trade, through the civil rights movement, Jim Crow, and all of the oppression that has been passed down through the bloodline, our mental
Mm-hmm.
wellness is something that we do need to take a deeper look at, because it is essential to heal us as individuals. That's what it's going to take to heal us collectively.
Mm.
And I'm going to
So
pause and turn this light back on. So just give
that
me a minute, but
that's
I
all
can
right.
I can definitely still hear you.
All right. Well, everyone, we just thank you for taking the time out to join us here on the platform. Again, if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts or any comments, please feel free to drop it in the box. We are wanting to hear from you, and we've been really excited and blessed to be able to have with us on this platform our candidate for City Council, Ward
Yes.
3 in Fort
Ward
Myers,
3.
Florida, Miss Sister Chantel Rhodes, who is also she is throwing up her signs, y'all. She's letting y'all
Listen,
know
that's
she
the
is,
three. That's the three. Just in
yeah.
case y'all ain't know, that's just three Ward 3.
That's it. She is letting us know who she's representing. Well, Chantel, I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak with you. We thank you for your transparency in this process as we talk about what it looks like to kind of get uncivil in our rights, right? And
Mhm.
where do we need to take this? So as I transition this conversation a little bit more, um, we all got an opportunity to at the beginning of this podcast to hear from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his thoughts about how civil rights was shifting. We talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, and we talked about healing lastly in our communities. There are some people who have a responsibility in our community, specifically the Black community, that I believe has a responsibility to it, but has fallen very short from their duties, roles, and responsibilities. And one of those groups of people, whom I am a part of, is the Black church and the Black clergy. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to kind of address this conversation as we move into this platform and thinking about where we're going on a political stance and space. Although we are a community, and a lot of them are 501c3 organizations who vow to say that they will not be involved in political agenda and
Right.
affairs, but they are. They will happily take money from those who want to come into their congregation and say, "Can we
Right.
speak to your people?" But so let's have a conversation
Right.
if we may, right? And again, I always say we take the covers off, but this is according to your comfortability.
Yeah.
I would like to begin to have some conversation about what's those roles and those responsibilities look like, and what are some of the people that we are um, and I don't want to say some of the people, what should we have as an expectation from some of those community partners,
Hmm.
and what would you like to do in order to connect them?
Well, I think the Black church in particular well, the church in general has been criticized for the lack of attention on matters of social justice. That's why I love my pastor, Dr. William L. Glover, is because he kept the work of justice at the forefront of our minds in terms of our spirituality, right? Because oftentimes we like to separate the two. Oh, we just gonna pray about it, and just, I don't know what they're doing out there, and we just need to pray. But this is a work that needs to be done, because faith without works is
Dead.
dead, right? And if you look at the scriptures, you will see plenty of references to justice that lets you know that the Lord loves justice. And one of the scriptures that my pastor, Dr. William L. Glover, keeps at the forefront of our mind is Micah 6:8. He has told
Mm,
you, oh man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. And so when we are clergy and our members of our congregation begin to dig into our scriptures, and to find how we can apply the scriptures to the current times, I think we'll experience success. And I think it does start with the clergy, with our leaders, with those who know, because those who know have an obligation to teach what you know to those who do not know. So justice, when the church can't show up, when the Black church in particular can't show up for Black Lives Matter movement, and they look up and they look at justice in general as if it is something that is separate from
Mm-hmm.
from God, or separate from the work that they are called to do on this earth, it is a tragedy. But like you said earlier, that's when it comes, we have to stretch our mind, we have to stretch our understanding of our spirituality and our concept of God. And if you look at a broad range of religions, you will see justice being emphasized and fair treatment. And we don't want Christians being ostracized and being marginalized. And we look at what is happening with Christians in various countries or during certain attacks. We don't like how that feels, right? So we have to understand that it's only a matter of time before our head is on the chopping block if we choose not to engage. So I just encourage people within the Black, and I think they're coming around to it. I like to see so many leaders, some of our leaders, of course, we have the Reverend Jesse Jackson and the Reverend Al Sharpton, who have been closely linking the Bible and Christianity to the work of justice. We have Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, who I am such a fan of. Lord have mercy, that Baptist preacher there. I am such a fan of his intelligence in his work. So we have these people who are leading that conversation about where does the church go? How does the church get involved? But the church is a place of refuge, right? And I think the church must continue to be that place of protection and refuge. And where do broken and hurting hearts go? They run to God. They run to the church, to the house of the Lord. And if the house of the Lord could also provide that information, or provide opportunities, or organize a day where that community can get involved in the work of justice, I think that'll be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so you just brought up a really great point, is getting churches involved in the work. How can we get churches involved in the work? What does that really look like? Not from a surface perspective, Chantel. I'm talking about really going in and saying we are a part of justice work, and that we see it. We're Matthew 25 church. We see ourselves as not just feeding hungry, because we have all of these different programming, and all the churches in the areas can say they're doing shelters here, they're doing this, they're doing that, but we really don't have that unifying factor. The thing that you said was a focus of the Black Lives Matter movement. What do we need to do, or how can we as a community of people be able to get over that ego? To get over the pride of saying this is mine, to being able to say this is God's, and what we're doing is the work of God, and we're going to come together to do God's work and to do justice and in a way that is pleasing unto God. So I'm going to leave that to you to give us your thoughts about.
Now you just said a mouthful right there, but I will start with this point about what is some action items that the Black church in particular can do. Form a justice ministry in your church. Just like you said, we'll feed the homeless all day long. We'll go out and participate in very admirable things. But let's dig a little bit deeper and look at the cause of poverty in a lot of our neighborhoods. Let's look at what is being unaddressed. And I think with ministries, it could be a regular lay person. Go to your reverend and say, I think we need a ministry of justice. A ministry that solely focuses on what is going on here locally when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to the economic challenges that our people face, poverty, crime, whatever it is. We want to not look at it as two separate entities, our spiritual life and then our earthly life. We got to merge that thing together, right? The saying, some people are so heavenly minded that they are no earthly good, and we don't want to fall into that trap. But when you look at Dr. King, another powerful example of ministry in action,
Mm-hmm.
Ministry in action. Dr. King had white folk out there with him, people that were from the Unitarian Universalist congregation, white people that stood with Dr. King from different faith groups and said, you know what, the Quakers, in fact, the Quakers were
Mm.
instrumental in the abolishment of slavery here in the United States. White
Yes.
folk that use their religion or their faith to fuel them to do the work of the earth, which is the work
Right.
of justice. So I think that's something very practical people do. And again, this goes for ministers as well. Follow the work of Dr. King. We wait until King Day and we, say a few scriptures, uh, and say a few quotes that Dr. King said, and then it's done, and then it's back to business as usual. But then life goes on in those same ghettos that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. What is happening in those ghettos? You want to save people's soul, but there is so much more that clouds the soul and that tarnishes and that harms the soul than a certain theology or a certain dogma or teaching that we want to push upon people. So as we're feeding and as we're clothing, and I respect the Black church so much, it is deeply ingrained in me, and I have such a reverence and a love for the charisma of the Black church. But I think there's always room for us to do better, and there's always more for us to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to give a shout out to some of those pastors that I know who are absolutely out there doing the work. William Berber, who is part of the National Poor People's Campaign, the Moral Monday segment, he has been doing the work. Reverend Lukata Mjumbe there in Princeton, New Jersey, my alma mater, my spiritual father, who is on his 55th day of fasting for the freedom of Sundiata Akoli, who just turned 85 last Friday. Those who are in Dr. Trulier, who is the president and head facilitator and trainer for Healing Communities USA, where I am also a trainer. Where if you are looking to figure out how do we create ministries of justice, how do we go in to create a ministry that no longer sees the incarcerated as stigma and
Mm,
shameful types of places, to being able to connect with those who are who I want to say 98% of the congregation has some type of family, friend, or close relative who has been a part of the criminal justice system. So I want to give a shout out to those who are doing the work and many more whom I have not called on today. My daughter is here on the line. She says, Mom, what about connecting to the troubled youth that are targeted at these types of times? This is a good question. And so for
yeah.
her, I know that this is a long lasting fight. So if no one knows, one of my journeys in life is to continue on the fight for those juveniles who have been adjudicated, and their families who have fallen through the cracks. I have a personal story of that. And it is a fight that's worth fighting
Mm,
for. So Chantel, as
mm,
you run and we think about our youth, because a lot of people look at us and they say, wow, they're really young, and they have a lot going for them, but I don't know if they can lead us. When we think about the youth in this matter, and we think about the voting rights and the
mm,
lack of youth that show up to the voting days, right, and to the ballots, what are some of the things that we can do to target our youth? I'm going to use that word because that's the word that my daughter used. I don't know if I
right,
necessarily will
right.
use it, but what are some of the things that we can do to engage our youth and to ensure that we are dealing with them from a space of healing, from
Mm.
that mental health space that you talked about earlier?
Right, right. Well, I think first of all, kudos to your daughter for being so woke and conscious and being even engaged in this sort of a discussion with such a powerful question. That is another complicated question, why, because first we have to figure out why the youth aren't engaged. Is it because of, this message that has been pushed out that your vote doesn't count, or that, oh, they gonna do what they want to do anyway, or blah blah blah. But I think a lot of it has to do with representation, as a
Mm.
younger person, which, to some people, I'm not even that young anymore. But I think it has to do with, are younger people showing up to participate? That's number one. To participate in the election process, to put themselves out there as candidates. But I think it's a tricky one, because you don't know why are the youth not engaged, and that's some of the things that we're exploring. But I think here locally, one of the things that I'm recognizing and that I'm hearing is that people think it's a game for the elderly. Oh, politics has nothing to do with me. Every politician I see is like of a certain age, and they've, probably retired out of another career, and now here they are, sitting in these positions for so long. But I think one of the things that elected officials have to do is start, the minute you take office, you need to start mentoring younger people to take your spot. But
Mm.
instead, you find people, I believe in term limits, because you find elected officials who will sit there for decades, sit there until they rot. Without even trying to polish up the next generation, and they quick to tell us, oh, you can do it. You're the future. Y'all young people. Well, get your butt up so that somebody else can have a shot at it. Move on to something else in life, because unless we continue this cycle with ideas such as term limits for people, they will stay there, especially when they aren't being challenged. But if that seat is up and that seat is vacant, it propels younger people to get involved in the process. But I think, again, younger people have an obligation too, to tune into it, to care about it, to tap into it. And you do see a lot of people. When I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, I believe her name was Mary Pratt Hector.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah, I
19
know.
years old. She
Yes.
works with the NAACP. And
Mm-hmm.
19 years old, running for elected office. And you see that in different places. And I think here locally, we just have to continue to, again, it's a process, because when you look at what has been lying dormant for so long, what has gone unchallenged for so long, it's no wonder people are discouraged, or younger people in particular. And then they have just so many other things that are vying for their attention. Like back in my day, it wasn't a whole lot to pay attention to. Like,
Mm-mm.
when I was growing up. But kids these days, they have a world of information that is pulling at their attention. And guess what? Politics just ain't interesting sometimes. It
Right.
is just not something that kids are just running home to turn on C-SPAN, to
Mm-hmm.
check out what this senator said, or this congressman or congresswoman is doing. So it's just something that we have to look at from multiple angles. When that important blessed white folk are, I love them so much. The white folk down here that are the part of trying to get voters engaged. They'll
Right.
start rapping. What kind of hip hop music do we need? They want to do whatever it takes, and I respect them. I laugh at them, but I respect them deeply because they are
Right.
trying.
Trying.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the things that she says is that, and I'll say this, she's probably come from a home that's been more involved in the political aspect than many. But what she says is that she hasn't been engaged because I never understood, nor has anyone ever tried to really explain it in a way that they could understand. And
Mm-hmm.
as far as it being hard when people are not taking them very seriously, I think that this is a much needed conversation in the fact that we oftentimes think we're doing what's needed, but we miss the mark.
Yeah.
And like you just said, with those who are eager enough to go out to say, do we need to wrap this? Do we need to do that? We're
Yeah.
thinking that that's the way in which it's going to connect with our youth, but they don't represent the youth, right?
Yeah.
So you could be 45 thinking that you're doing it and you rapping and you doing all that other stuff, but if
Yeah.
you don't look like them and you can't relate to their times, to their vernacular or anything that they have going on, their
Absolutely.
struggles, they're not going to be be able to see it in the same way. And so I
Absolutely.
wonder if there are ways in which, and I know from where I am originally from, I am not an original Floridian. I came and migrated
Oh,
here.
we can
I,
tell. We can
I,
tell.
Yes, yes. I wonder if from where I stand, we had the National Federation of Democratic Women. Shout out to all of y'all up there up north. I miss y'all so much. But I don't see those types of things that are here in this community or in
Mm,
a lot of other communities whereby they will take young women or young
mm,
men and kind of mold them and engage them in conversations according to what it is that their beliefs are and what's
mhm.
important to them. There oftentimes we keep a very siloed perspective, a very tunneled view about what
Right,
politics should incorporate. And sometimes we think that when the young person says, well, me being able to go over here and buy cryptocurrency is my ability to connect with my environment, we
right,
thinking that, oh, well, it's volatile. They don't know what they're talking about,
right,
but
right.
maybe it's something that we need to think about because it is the currency of the future,
Yeah,
right? And so,
yeah.
how do we get involved and how do we get those prominent stakeholders involved in conversations that might not necessarily look like what we're used to, but will be what it is that they will be having to get used to
Mhm.
as they grow older?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier about that word ego, and this idea that it's not enough for us to go over, or just this idea that there is a single path or a single way to get something accomplished. But back to the comment that you mentioned earlier about those message not understanding, younger people not understanding those messages. And so what I one of the things that I plan to continue to do is to translate those messages, right? What does all of these wordy documents and these people that will purposely talk over your head so that you don't understand what's at stake here? Let's translate that to the people and simplify it to where people can understand, not simplify it in a way that we believe people don't have the intelligence or the capacity to understand. Let's simplify it simply because people got other stuff to do. Quite
Right,
frankly,
right.
people have other stuff to do besides be so knee deep into politics when someone else is actually assigned that position,
Mm,
and they're not taking those opportunities to reach across the aisles, those generational aisles, those racial aisles, reach across party lines, and they're
mm,
unwilling to do that. And I think there's a lot
mm,
of us who are frustrated with that. And so when I come to the table, I want to see the fullness of our representation here, not just in
mm,
Ward 3, but in the city of Fort Myers, in Lee County. We hear the conversations about redistricting and how gerrymandering is pushing certain groups of people out and
mm-hmm,
silencing their voice. And so we have to continue to show up to this battle. Well, and it's not enough of us, like to your point. And there are organizations here who are at work. We have the NAACP, who has been in our community for years. And then we have organizations that are not predominantly Black, but we have the National Organization for Women. We have the Women's March here locally. So many different organizations, but people don't find those voices inclusive enough sometimes, or
mm,
interesting enough sometimes. So I think it's about, for those younger people who are wondering what you can do, put on a t-shirt with something you represent, get a bunch of your buddies and your friends together, and that's where your movement starts, right then and there. Build it and they will come. For those young people who feel like they don't have a place or a seat at the table, make sure you have a seat at the table. I don't buy that as an excuse anymore. If you want to show up with intelligence, show up well armed with facts and well armed with knowledge. And if you can't show up with knowledge, at least show up to the table to learn something about whatever it is that you care about. Because guess what? At some point, you're going to be in this. At some point, you may face an affordable housing crisis. At some
mm.
point, your grandmother or your grandfather may be a victim of something that, had we paid attention to it, certain laws would not have been passed. So yeah, just show
Right.
up. That's the important message.
So I'm gonna charge you as we end out, and I hope it's okay, because I will 1,000% back whatever it is that I challenge someone else with. I will back it up in my own action.
Oh
I
Lord.
charge you, sis, to
Okay,
create
what
the
is it?
table. Create the table for the youth. I
Mm-hmm.
charge you to take it to the streets and
Mm-hmm.
to create exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Let's model the behavior. I'm more so it's either you're gonna get down or you're gonna lay down in my books. And so we
Right.
get
Right.
down. And in my household, we talk about going to war with God inside us. And so what I say to us, as we are in our mid 30s, going in the 40s and
Mm-hmm.
upper, right?
Right.
What we at times need to create these spaces for our youth. And
Right.
so Michelle says Black kids are particularly vulnerable to systematic racism directly impacting them. What
Mm.
can we do to help protect them mentally and physically when they are getting engaged? What I'm going to say first to that, Michelle, is
Great
we can
question.
always try to protect, but we
Mm.
can't keep our children from experience. And
Yeah.
sometimes the experience is necessary in order for the movement to happen. And
Yeah.
so, as much as I want to say to you, yes, let's go out and do all of this mental work and let's go out and put together these programs to protect them and gird them up. When we were growing up, Dr. Martin Luther King struggled with mental health issues. Malcolm X struggled with all these things.
Mm.
These people had real struggles. They they experienced life in a way that made them have to get up every day and have
Mm.
a reason to fight for
That part.
something.
That part.
What are our children fighting for? What are you fighting for our children? So, if it is about the mental and physical stability and well being, how do we help guide them? How
Mm-hmm.
are we going to be agents of change, showing them how to do it healthily? How can we say we're here to help them unify for a cause? Because often we're seeing division. How can we learn how to take one gang and make it a real gang? In my house, we
Right.
call it
Right.
God gang, right?
Right.
We
Right.
we
Right.
we we
Well,
we
love, you doing it.
right,
Listen,
right.
Monica, you're doing it with this show, with this platform. This is the building they will come, and I do accept that challenge. I do accept that charge, and we have been out here doing the work. But you're absolutely right when it comes to this idea of protection. I don't want them to experience it. If it's there, they need to they once they feel the effects of it. To your point, like you said, our ancestors imagine, what they experienced. Some of them chose the sea to jump overboard instead of staying there and being enslaved, and I don't judge either one of them. So when you look at all of the things that they have faced throughout the years, to get roughed up a little bit in this fight, to experience it, hurts. Don't get me wrong, but that pain is what fuels you to show up to the movement. Imagine a generation of people that have not experienced the ills of racism. I mean, in a way that is a good thing, but in a way, because they haven't experienced it, it doesn't
Doesn't
exist.
mean right. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist,
It
right?
doesn't exist. So in terms of protection, that protection has to be that guidance. So your child, Monica, is able to see their mother in the fight, engaged by taking over the airways, and by having these conversations where people can be real and transparent, and where people can get connected to other resources. So yeah, it's a deep conversation, but that systematic oppression that occurs in our school systems, become a teacher, become an
Yeah.
administrator, stay in that fight, run for school board, run for elected office, because how else can you influence the system? How better can you influence the system than being within it?
And I'm going to just add a note here. It doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers right now. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you have to know everything about the political landscape at all. There
Right.
are oftentimes a lot of people who are just coming in because they have been a part of the experience. They
Yep.
have been witness to and bore witness to, and they wanting to continue to be a witness to the change of what has transpired. So I
Hmm.
just want to say before we end out today, I just want to say again, thank you, Chantel, for your willingness to come into the throne room and take the covers off. It is not something that I take lightly. It is not something something that I take for granted. It takes a lot to be willing to come and put yourself out there and to essentially expose yourself, because
Right.
you're letting people into your thinking, into your
Yes.
space. And to know that on the other end of that spectrum, I know that everything, again, like you said earlier, has a consequence. And as you continue to talk about your beliefs and your stances and where you are, we do know that there is a possibility that there's somewhere someone listening with the ear of evil, right?
Yeah.
To be
Yeah.
able to take and warp what we say into
Right.
their own woes, right? To be able to make it seem as if we mean or have ill intent. But I believe that God never does anything for no reason. And so we thank those who
Yes.
connected us together today. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're taking on the challenge and the charge to go out and create the space for those young people. I believe that
Amen.
that is a new movement that
Yeah.
we need to see. That although Black Lives Matter movement, Black lives do matter, and we do appreciate those who have put the work in for the Black Lives Matter movement, we are now looking for the movement of our people right here in Lee County. And so, as you take up a mantle,
Yeah.
don't drop the mic. Pass it on.
Oh, love, you better believe I am. And no weapon. As far as those who's listening with the evil, the evil intentions, no weapon, no weapon formed again,
That's
because
right.
I do believe that this is God's work. And I just want to give a shout out to those who are in our communities faithfully working the Divine Nine. Shout out to my
Hmm.
sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, on Dr. King Day. All of the organizations were out there representing and showing up. And these people have been working in their communities, serving their communities, creating spaces for young people. That's just one particular group, the Divine Nine, but so many people have been doing the work. So I do not want to make it seem as though this is something new that we're going to try to get involved with the community. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no, but to your point, I accept that challenge because it is our time now.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the people as we close out this
I just want to
afternoon?
say thank you to you. I am grateful for this opportunity, for you and the work that you are doing. I am grateful for all of those who tune in faithfully to listen to this show, all of those who are
Yes.
involved. I just want to say be encouraged. We love you. We need you out here, in whatever capacity you choose to show up. You are needed, you are loved, and be encouraged.
Yes, be encouraged, everyone. Don't forget to tune in next week right here in the throne room at 5 p.m. next Wednesday for Barbershop Conversations. Our brother and our friend Ned will be on. And actually, next week we are going to continue this conversation for our community. We are going to be speaking about COVID and the Black family. And so we
Mm,
are going to continue on the conversation about bringing healing inside of our communities. We've heard a lot about COVID, but this time we're coming from, as always, another perspective. So let's tune in. Let's talk about it. If you have not been able to go in and get your kits, you got your free testing kits that are coming in through the United States Postal Service. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to our platform. We will be more than happy to share that information with you. Again, you're never on this journey alone. We love that you come. We love that you participate, and we love that you're here. We'll see you next week right here in the throne room at 5 p.m. Have a great evening, guys, and a wonderful rest of the week.